Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. This is our daily vlog edition for now, at least. I may be merging these two pretty soon, I'm not sure yet. Either way, today we're going to talk about medium format cameras and inexpensive ways to get into medium format. If you're not familiar, I've done podcasts in the past, I'll put some links below. But film formats, 35 millimeter is popular as it was for years and years. It was always considered an amateur film format, and mainly it was because of the size of the negative that you get in the end. It's very small compared to something like large format, which is 4x5, 4 inches by 5 inches, which is a really large negative, or 8x10, which is really large. Medium format sits in the medium, and usually 6 centimeters by 6 centimeters square is the standard format, although there are some rectangular formats as well. So you can find cameras that are 6x7, 6x9. In fact, a couple episodes ago I showed you my Voigtlander Bessa, which is a 6x9. So it's a rectangular format. It looks more like 35 in a way, even though you're getting a much bigger negative. The obvious benefit to having a really large negative is that you have more information and more detail that goes onto that negative, so you can get really large prints, you can get really sharp prints, really clear. Whereas 35 millimeter has always been considered a little bit of an amateur or inferior format, even though, and this is a different topic and I've talked about before, but the 35 millimeter changed the game as far as portability and how photographers could make images and the size. However, medium format does have some advantages. Now, the only camera I've talked about ever on this podcast that's medium format, other than my Voigtlander, is really the Holga. And I do still consider the Holga to be the cheapest way to get into medium format. Now, it depends on what kind of images you want to make. In fact, I was telling somebody in an email the other day who had asked me the question about getting into medium format. The Holga, because the lens is just a very crude single element plastic meniscus lens, tends to be very inconsistent. So every camera has a little bit different look. I personally like that. You get the big negative, you get the detail. Not this one, the main Holga that I shoot on that was modified by Randy at Holga Mods, again, link below. Randy does awesome work and you can get some really fun Holgas. They're going to cost you a little more than $30, but you can do some cool modifications to them. You know, bulb exposure, having cable release, things like that. But the Holga's great, but generally you're going to have more of a blurry, artistic kind of look to things in general. I have seen some pretty sharp Holga lenses, but they still have imperfections. It's a cheap way to get into medium format, but if you are interested in going a little further and doing something, one of the cameras that I bought years ago is this one. This is a Kiev 88. It is another Russian camera. This one is medium format. It's a complete clunker and I actually love it. I don't shoot on it as much anymore, but at one point I really wanted to get into really sharp image making with medium format. Couldn't afford a Hasselblad, and so the Kiev 88 is actually not a bad alternative, and I'll tell you why. The Kiev 88 is actually a Russian copy of an older model Hasselblad, and it's actually specifically the Hasselblad 1600F, I think, which I've never actually seen one. They're collector cameras, and it was a little bit crude and not as refined as the later CM models and the like. But it's very similar. It's modular in design. You can take off the lens. In fact, the lenses are interchangeable. And the cool thing is that you can get, you know, when you consider what the cost would be for a Hasselblad system with a bunch of lenses, you can get into these Russian cameras much more inexpensively, particularly with the wide angle and the fisheye lenses. So rather than having to pay $6,000 for a lens, which you would with a Hasselblad line, you can pay a lot less. Usually, I haven't ever bought one of the wide angle, and I can't remember what they go for. I'd have to look on eBay, but anyway, let me show you this before I put it back together. The whole idea with the Kiev 88 is modular in design, just like the Hasselblad, so you can actually get extra film backs. These come off. So this right here is the body. You have a viewfinder at the top. There are alternative viewfinders, and I'll show you in a little bit here. And the biggest difference between a modern Hasselblad camera, and this is a little frustrating in the Kiev 88, is this big metal shutter back here. And the metal shutter is clunky. My friend Andy calls it the nutcracker because it makes such a horrible sound when you open and close it. They're not quiet cameras. They're not, you know, they're very obtrusive. But, you know, for the fraction of the cost of a Hasselblad, I think you can get into a basic body viewfinder and back and 80 millimeter lens for probably $250, I'm guessing, something like that. I haven't looked at the eBay prices in a long time. They may have come down. That's, I think, what I paid for this one. But anyway, interchangeable lenses, which is very nice. The standard 80mm lens, focal length of 2.8. And it's an all-around, you know, it's not quite the Zeiss lenses that come on the Hasselblads, maybe not quite that tack sharp. And people who tend to look very closely, I've been told, you know, there are big differences in the contrast. And having shot on both, you know, I don't know, these are good enough, and I tend to manipulate a little bit in the darkroom and a little bit in Photoshop, so with levels and things, so the contrast of the lens is not something I'm as picky about. But it does have a shutter curtain, and that's a big difference. The Hasselblad 1600F had a shutter curtain too. I don't know whether it was metal or not, but either way, the modern Hasselblads all have leaf shutters that live inside the lens, so they're much quieter. And then the biggest difference, and this is the biggest, really the only gripe I would have about this camera, is you do have to learn how to get around a few things. And one of them is, particularly, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. I live in Texas, it's extremely hot, and I was being pretty prolific with my photo taking that summer. And a lot of it, I just decided to start doing a lot of my botanical stuff, a lot of the flowers that I was shooting, a lot of the still lifes with vegetables and fruit and the like. That sounds so funny to say, but anyway, but I was getting good results, and I was using the Kiev a lot at that time. Now, one thing though, if you're doing very moody lighting, it's very low lighting, you've got the tripod set, and you've stopped way down to like f11 or something, and you're going to get a really sharp photo, or you're using a macro lens filter, and you know, maybe you have to stop down to f22 or the like. The problem that you have is with really slow shutter speeds, easy for me to say, is that the massive shutter curtain that's made out of metal in there will pop on you, and it makes a loud noise, and it also physically shakes the camera. So I ended up having a lot of blurred areas on my images, so it needs an adjustment. The lens is a little loose, but anyway, very easy to deal with. I got a strap for this one so you can take it on the go. It's a very heavy camera. Essentially, it is an SLR camera, so if you pop open the top viewfinder and you look in there, you're able to see composed through the lens, which, you know, is different than a TLR. You can get your focus set, you can get your this one does not have a meter in it. You can get them with a metered eye level prism, which replaces this. It just slides out when you take the back off, and that enables you to treat it more like an SLR as far as, like, you know, you're composing, and those do have a meter in it. The meter kind of tells you what you need to set it at, so it's not a fast meter, and certainly not modern by any stretch of the imagination. Anyway, the Kiev 80, it's a very cool camera. It also has inside, I figured out how to open it, yeah, there's a I don't know if you see that open up or not, but you can pop this up here, and you get a little magnifying glass for extra, you know, sensitive, sharp focusing if you really want to get detailed. But they work really great. I believe there's a set of bellows available for this. Anyway, it's a whole camera system, and like I said, for a fraction of the cost that's going to cost you to get into a Hasselblad, this is an excellent alternative. Flash does work on it, and they have interchangeable backs, so you could, if you are out on the street shooting on location, you could have one back loaded with one film type, and a second back look, you know, like if I had black and white film in this back, I could have another one in my bag that has color slide film or something in it, and you can go back and forth, which is pretty cool. Anyway, it's a clunky camera. The design, they're not really fragile, but I have had them break on me in the past, and that's no fun. This is actually the second one I've owned. The first one just locked up after taking a picture one time, and I was never able to get it unfrozen. I even, you know, because I banged it against the concrete trying to unlock it and destroy the whole thing. But anyway, I really shouldn't talk about that here. This is about camera love and not destruction. But anyway, all that aside, anyway, the shutter speeds, basically you have a bulb setting, 1/25 of a second. Well, you have some slower settings too. So it's bulb, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, excuse me, bulb, half a second, quarter second, eighth of a second, 15th of a second, 30 just goes up and stops. Up to 1,000 is your top shutter speed on that. So anyway, it does have a stop down, so you can do depth of field preview. And like I said, they're really a nice alternative to Hasselblad. They are nowhere near the construction, the build quality, anything like that. But if you want to take good medium format pictures, it's not a bad choice. There are others, I'm sure people are watching this thinking, but I have, you know, and I know there are many others, but this is one that when I was particularly budget conscious at one point in my life that I did get, and I love it. I still shoot on every now and then today. The viewfinder is not as bright as the Hasselblad's. It's funky, and you kind of have to learn to get around it sometimes to get specific pictures, like I mentioned, the long shutter speed. So if you have a slow shutter speed, you're probably going to get some motion blur from the camera jolting when that shutter pops open. There is a second model. This is the earlier one. This is just a standard Kiev 88. There's a second model called the Kiev 88 CM, and the difference is they changed, well, first of all, the shutter curtain is not made of metal, it's made of cloth, which reduces some of the jarring that goes on in slow shutters speeds. And the other thing is they changed the lens mount, and so it is actually the same lens mount that's used with a camera made in the Czech Republic. I don't know when, but the the Pentacon 67. Is that right? No, the Pentacon 6. I'm getting them all mixed up. The Pentacon 6 became later what the Pentax uses, the 6.7. It's an SLR looking camera, and they changed the lens mount so you could actually use the same lenses that you can get for the Pentacon cameras, which are real Zeiss lenses. The problem that I have with that is that the Kiev 88 CMs, typically, if you buy them, there's a company in the US that's actually distributing them still. And the problem is when you buy them, they start to go up in cost. A little bit better camera for, I think, more than a little bit money. And I think at that point, you'd probably be doing better to either just get a Pentacon 6 system, or I would look into starting into a Hasselblad system. So that's just my point. Is like, you're doing this to save money, so I would go with the bottom of the line on this. Gorgeous pictures. I will put a link below or in the show notes, however you're viewing this episode. I'll put a Flickr gallery of stuff that I've taken. I've managed to get some really good images out of here, and you know, one of the ways I got around the shutter jarring motion, the picture blurs just a little bit around edges and stuff. I would go to really long shutter speeds so that jarring wouldn't set into the image, or you need more light. Those are the two ways around it. The cable release is kind of, it works, but it's odd as well. But anyway, wonderful alternative to a Hasselblad system. It's the Kiev 88. Check it out. I will put links below so you can find out more if you're interested. Especially, you know, some of you guys, I got a lot of cool feedback on the Russian 35mm stuff I did with the Feds and the Zorkis. And it's fun because, you know, essentially none of these are expensive cameras, so they are kind of fun to collect in a way. But I like making images with them. In fact, I will say this about the Kiev 88. The Kiev 88 to medium format is much better images than I found the Feds and the Zorkis to be to 35mm. And part of that is probably because of the size of the negative that you get in the end. But anyway, the Kiev 88 is a great camera. Go check them out. We'll look at some more stuff as we go, but you guys have wanted some fun camera previews that I'm not calling them reviews. They're old anyway. Oh, an interesting thing also I found when I was looking a few things up to do this episode is that Kiev actually closed the plant in Russia in 2009, and they are no longer being made. And it is rumored that the U.S. distributor has enough to last a couple more years, but nobody really knows. So it could be that these start getting extinct. So you never know. It could be a funky collector item at some point in its life. But anyway, Kiev 88, check it out. Probably the best place to find these, honestly, is eBay, even though I really have a big love-hate with eBay sometimes. But really, it's the only way to get them. And look around, you can find a good deal. Usually you get the kit, which comes with like this big leather box that it comes in that you can use as a camera bag. Usually comes with an 80mm lens, f2.8. Usually it's an RSAT, or I can't remember what the previous one was called on these. There's two different models. It's the same thing. They just changed the name. And usually get one film bag, sometimes two. So anyway, check it out. That's the Kiev 88. And I will see you next time on The Art of Photography. Thank you for watching.